Hello, y'all. This is the Low Brass Network podcast, and this is the fifth episode. I'm joined by Dr. Zokaites,
Hi,
and
how's it going? It's great to be here.
yeah, and he is a very renowned musician. We're going to be talking a lot about him and the LBN festival today. And halfway through, we might run into our co-director, Andrew Hazard, which is director of the East Bay in LBN. And I'm Eun Jee, director and representative of the West Coast. Or sorry, did I say East Bay? I meant West Coast. Or East Coast. Yeah. So first, let's talk about you, Dr. Zokaites. I wanted to go over um one sec, what your story is.
Yeah, so I think I occupy a pretty creative section of our industry. So I grew up in Southwest Virginia and had a normal music school experience. I went to the University of South Carolina and then to the University of Cincinnati. But then I kind of had this period of my life where I just kind of went out in the world and saw what was there. I taught a little bit of middle school in Denver, and then I moved to the Netherlands and studied there for a few years. And while I was there, I started commissioning a bunch of composers, specifically working on a couple of large-scale commissioning projects. I called it the Ghetto Blaster Project, which recycled noise pollution, and then transformative perspectives that really worked with poetry and music, um, and then a group called Train of Thought, and we did avant-garde music in punk rock venues and coffee shops. Um, and after I finished up there, I came back and did a doctorate at the University of Cincinnati. Um, and I've been able to maintain this creative output. So I worked with about 32 composers. Um, I've been pretty active at the International Trombone Festival. I've played a solo recital, a duo recital, and a chamber music recital, all at ITF. And I was able to record a concerto with the U.S. Army Band in DC. And I've just kind of really enjoyed uh, working and collaborating with a pretty wide set of musicians. Um, and that uh, gets us up to my teaching career. I taught for 4 years at Morehead State University in Kentucky, and now I'm teaching at Fresno State and the University of California in Davis. Um, and California is a lot of fun, and really enjoy being out here.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, what do you teach? And is it fun?
Yeah, so I teach trombone and euphonium at Fresno State. I also teach one section of music theory, but I have 17 students here in Fresno between the two different instruments, and we have a pretty active trombone choir. We're going to play at the SoCal Trombone Day next month, and then we also were invited to perform at ITF this summer in Salt Lake City. And then my duties at UC Davis are a little bit smaller. I've got a couple of students up there, but I also coach the brass and the orchestra, and I help out with the uh, composition classes up there. Just a couple of introduction to the trombone sort of lectures.
Yeah, that honestly seems really fun. And could you tell me sort of what the goal is in all of this?
Yeah. So a little bit like your work with LBN, when I was just starting my undergraduate degree, I came across a man named Tom Everett, who actually founded the ITF. and he commissioned somewhere in the 60s, 60 or 63, 68 pieces for the bass trombone. Um, and that was very inspiring to me. So I just really started working with composers to really kind of progress our literature that's available. Um, Composers, people like Brad Edwards and Ines McComas and Ken Fuchs and Will Timmons have written pieces for me that have become fairly popular in undergraduate recitals and other professors' recitals. Um, and Inez has actually gone on to compose quite a bit of music for some pretty famous people. Um, and so I think 15, 20 years ago, it started out with how do we add to the art form and how do we have a creative voice. And now I've finished 7 or 8 pretty large scale projects, and I think it's going really well. Uh, so it's working with composers has given me a voice and how to contribute, and I find that incredibly rewarding, and that's kind of my goal. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think right now we are also working with composers. There is a composer that the low brass ensemble, they played Song for Japan,
Yep.
and that was a trombone quartet. And we are working with the composer, and he's really nice, I feel like, allowing us not only more opportunities, but also being like deeply entwined with what's being made and what we are also like putting out to,
Right. Working
yeah.
with a composer and collaborating, uh, allows the composer a voice, but it also allows you more ownership in that voice. So when we create in this fashion, when performers work with composers, I feel like the um, some of the parts is a much better performance. Gives us all ownership of the piece instead of just studying the classics.
Yeah, I think it also comes with a bit of responsibility though, because sometimes you play a piece and that isn't how the composer envisioned it. So I know we haven't had trouble with that, but while I was working, or we had the podcast with Dr. Lauren Rudzinskis, and
Yep.
she works with a lot of underrepresented composers, um, such as women or other minority races. And there was one project that she did where she worked heavily, but then one part of that piece that that they did, the composer said, I think we should change this a little bit because that's not how I sort of express this in the sheet music. And they had to actually they did it again and revised. So
Yeah, that's actually a big part of the collaboration process. So when a composer delivers their sheet music the first time, uh, as a collaborator, it's our responsibility to go through and catch these things, maybe make several recordings. So one of my favorite pieces was a piece that Carrie Magan wrote for me. It's called Coffee Stained. And this is for piano, bass trombone, and narrator. And here the narrator speaks poetry uh, during the music. So we had several test concerts before we officially premiered the piece, and every time we would send the recordings back to Carrie, and she was sometimes she would add a couple of extra beats because the narrator was needed a few more beats to um, speak the verse that we were on, or sometimes she changed the key, or um, you know, she had this one section where it was a bunch of rips, and she had maybe a high C written or something, and then I played it as a high F, so she changed something like that. Um, but I think my most successful works are the ones that are in this period the longest. So really the back and forth, how to make something idiomatic on the horn, how does the audience respond to the music? You might have 4 or 5 performances of a piece before the composer says, okay, this is how it should be. What's on the music, what's on the sheet is correct. And I feel confident that other musicians are going to play it uh, pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. What I'm getting at here is you want to make not only a lot of music out there so that people can enjoy it, but also make the music as good or as best as it can be in terms of quality and working with the composer and getting through all of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I think that's really inspiring actually because there's just so much you can do with the trombone that I think not only the trombone, just low brass in general, that I feel like are it's pretty underappreciated at times. And sometimes I'm a bass trombone, so I have been experienced with a sheet music where all I'm playing are bops, right? I'm
Sure.
acting as a drum. But I think it's really inspiring that we're sort of creating this really good music and working with composers to sort of bring out this thing that we can bring out.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I've also noticed that you have an album called Bootleg. So would you like to talk about that?
Sure. So Bootleg was probably my longest project. Certainly the most professionally published project. Um, and what happened was I had all this experience with commissioning and working on these projects when I lived in Europe. And then when I moved home to the Appalachian Mountains, I kind of wanted to take this commissioning experience and kind of relate it to a more of an Appalachian or American identity. So a couple of things happened right when we started the idea. So Ken Fuchs and Brad Edwards, Martin Habel, and Will Timmons. Um, I knew I wanted those guys to write various pieces. And Ken Fuchs is a wonderful composer, and he's won a Grammy, recorded 5 albums with the London Symphony. Um, and he very graciously agreed to write a concerto. And Martin Habel is actually one of his students. And Martin took the kind of idiosyncrasies of Appalachian music and kind of distilled them down, like how looked at how melodies are constructed and rhythmically what's going on there. And he wrote a really nice trio for cello, piano, and bass trombone. And then studying with Brad, and he's starting to become a very good composer. And his music's getting out there. He had written a folk melody duo for him and his wife, and it was really great. So uh, Brad made me ask him several times to get the piece written. And then Will Timmons is one of my best friends. He plays uh, trombone for the Air Force Ceremonial Band in DC. And A Strange Wayfarer is actually the second piece he's written for me. But this one is for Looping Station. So all 4 of these pieces had these like really strong identity elements of themselves, but then they also packaged very nicely together in this album. Um, and we it was published in November of 2021. We were the #1 new music album on the Amazon store that week. And it's been reviewed in the International Trombone Association Journal, in Fanfare Magazine, and George Curran of the New York Phil and Sasha Romero, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, also were kind enough to write some glowing reviews. So I'm really happy with how successful that piece is. I'm really grateful to my collaborators in the chamber music and then also with the U.S. Army Band for recording it. Um, and it really it took everybody. It took everybody to get that done, and it'll be a crowning jewel in my career for a long time. And I know that the Latch and Duets brass piece has been performed a couple of times throughout the country. And Ken's concerto has been performed by the Netherlands Symphony Orchestra, the Iceland Symphony, the Navy Band, the Coast Guard Band, and then by a bunch of people with piano. So I'm pretty confident that some of these pieces are working their way into the repertoire, and hopefully they stay because they're all four really great pieces.
I think that's really empowering, as well as how you mentioned like all of the collaborators. Like it wasn't just one, it was everyone,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it,
I think another thing you pointed out is how the music, they had sort of themes. And I feel like sometimes people forget that music, it is an art. And
yep.
music can have those sorts of moods. Like I think you say it was Appalachian inspired, right?
Mhm.
And it's like folk music, and you you can really bring out a sort of picture when listening to any music at all.
Yeah, well said.
Anyways, I just wanted to have a little bit and talk about your projects, including maybe your past festivals.
Yeah. So it takes a fair amount of organizational chops to do anything these days. Um, in working with all the composers, we had to raise a bunch of money, write several grants, um, and then being a teacher. Any teacher out there knows most of our time is actually spent making sure kids are registered and all the advising goes well. Um, but because of all of those activities, in 2013, I hosted my first festival, which was part of the conservatory I was studying at in Holland. We call it the Art Seeds Festival. And this was 17 concerts across 3 cities in 3 days. Um, and I was part of the organizational team. So we had to organize all the venues, organize all the publicity. That was a project that I got to play live on Dutch national radio, which was a real treat. Um, but the organizational team really did a great job. And from there, uh, my teachers had run the Latch Festival in 2009 and 2011. So in 2014, they asked me to be part of the organizational committee. And my job was English language promotion and North American recruitment. So I was on tour on the East Coast. We played at a bunch of schools, Mars Hill College, Virginia Commonwealth, uh, NYU, the Manhattan School of Music, Brooklyn College, uh, and took a lot of students over to study for a week in December. And we were working with that year Zoltan Kiss and Bront Atema, Martin Skippers, Mimi Shimizu, Carol Jarvis, Jigs Wiggum, just a bunch of people. And then in 2018, we did it again. And this time, Christian Lindbergh conducted the orchestra. I actually served as his rehearsal conductor. We had 80 trombone players that all had to play with the orchestra, and the trombone players had to know the part before rehearsing with the orchestra. So my job was to rehearse the 80 or so trombonists. In that year, Stefan Schultz joined us. We had some younger artists join us. Um, and we had four trombone classes from all over the world. A group from Turkey joined us, a group from UCLA, Columbus State in Georgia, and the University of Toronto. They all brought all of their students. So that was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. Um, and now I use all of those skills in teaching, bringing in guest artists, and kind of making sure we have good audiences for all of our students and things like that.
Yeah, all of it sounds like it initially it sounds extremely ambitious, right? If you just
Yeah.
say like, oh, so we're gonna do this thing with like 3 cities, 80 performances or something. I forgot. Like if you just say that and
Yeah.
it sounds like, are you crazy? Sort of something in that sense, right? And I mean, we are setting up the LBN festival, and it is seeming to be very big and stuff. And we could
Well,
definitely, Mhm.
I think what's really inspiring about LBN is that you have really created this network that spans not only the US, but you're getting some international traction as well. Um, and your activities are so uh, diverse and so widespread that you're really making these connections. And for you as a young guy, and for your colleagues, that I think it's really important to have that connection. And that's kind of what we see in the world, right? We're breaking down these barriers, and
Definitely.
because there's so many of you and so many different places, you've already made some cool stuff happen, and you're going to make some really cool stuff happen in the future.
I think the main thing is sometimes it feels like you can't do anything, but you definitely can. You make a group and you don't realize how much that is just making a group.
Yeah.
And you can be the change that you want to see happen. I know that sounds very cliche, but like I know our marching band, um, you have to pay 100 for that school year to get in the marching band. And there are other sort of organizations around dealing with sort of instrumentation and stuff like that. And a lot of it is very sort of it takes a lot of money and there's not a lot of access and sometimes it is unjust. And that's how LBN was actually first created. We wanted to give opportunities directed towards like low brass players and have a sort of more closer audience rather than just having like another nonprofit, right? We wanted to do a lot and create opportunities and do all that stuff. So,
Yeah, and you've done that through your lessons program, and through the ensembles, through your scientific studies that you've done, working with composers, and now the festival's a huge undertaking. So it's not your first project, but you can see how you've progressed, and your committee said you wanted to do this, and now you're doing it. And uh, I think you're seeing kind of the community uh, respond to you in a very positive way.
yeah, I think it's almost insane to think that we were founded winter 2022. That's literally like just a year ago,
Yeah,
right? And this huge undertaking definitely wouldn't have been possible without, like how you said, right? You need everyone. And
yeah,
the reason why we can do things like this is because we have everyone. We have so many sponsors. We have so many judges. We have so many artists. We still have artists signing up right now. We thought it would stop at like 20. We're having at least 50 or more. Like definitely way more than 50 actually.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And basically, I think we might end up making the festival free just to have that sort of access again.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that. You get to have Q&A sessions, master classes, and all of that just for free. And I think um it's really significant how we got this far. And um actually, that's a really good segue to our festival that we are planning. We talked a little bit about it, but basically the LBN festival, as I've been advertising since episode 1, is basically just going to be um a place where people, any low brass player, can meet a bunch of low brass artists. There'll be ensembles, there'll be um whatever group that you want. There can be soloists. And not only is it just performances, but you also get like master classes, there's Q&A sessions, and we will be even giving out some prizes throughout the ensemble. When I met with Dan Vecchio, creator of Trombone Champ, on episode 4, he said there might be something like prom promo codes or free copies of the game that might be going around throughout
Very
the
cool.
festival. Yeah, I think it there's a lot that is going on, and it is in currently we are planning it, and it's in the middle stages of planning. But I actually wanted to ask about your opinion on
Sure.
the state of making it like free, because I know some people, if we make it free, some people might say that they might not place as much significance on it, rather than, let's say, even if they paid like $1, it would be way more significant and they would be more likely to come.
So that's a pretty big conversation, I think.
Yeah,
Um, so I think that discussion actually lies in the audience, and you're trying to create this worldwide collaboration and provide these resources to people that are underserved. So you're going to find a different audience than than is at, say, maybe um, the Alessi seminar, or something that uh, people have already had to have practiced for decades and have a not just a high financial stake in it, but also um, they're on the cusp of winning a professional audition. So those are different audiences, right? And if you're going to charge, if it's going to be free, or if you're going to charge, $15, right? You're still making it a widely accessible competition and festival, and that's amazing. And you're developing audiences that way. So I think it's probably a great idea to keep it, uh, if that's your goal, to keep it on the cheaper side, or possibly make it free. Um, but also, you have to make sure that on the other side, your finances are all in line, right? Making sure that everybody's happy, uh, all the artists and judges and things, and everyone's agreed to do whatever. You got to make sure that you're financially solvent, and that sort of responsibility also goes into it. So I think your question isn't necessarily about um, motivating people to participate. It should be about what audience you're trying to develop, and making sure that you're financially responsible.
I really love that answer. On asking the audience about it, right? And
Yeah.
for any audience members, potential people that will go to the festival later, definitely contact us through the website and tell us what you think.
There
But
you go.
yeah, I really love that answer. And one of the best things about the festival is just the amount of backing that we have. We have actually over 60% of the artists saying that they'll only do it on the condition that their part is free. And
Wow.
yeah, it's just like they're dedicated, we're dedicated. Any any others the sponsors will cover. We are doing a little bit of ads for the sponsors because we want to promote them
Of
as well
course.
as a company. Um, But yeah, I think fine on the financial side, the reason we are making it free is just because we have so much backing, and we could definitely not have done that without like anyone, even like the community that is going into the LBN festival.
There you go.
Anyways, yeah, I mean, we were talking a lot about how the festival would go down because it is a virtual festival. Maybe next year we will do a festival in which it is hybrid. That is something that we are considering. But we are right now this is highly like not confirmed yet, I guess would be the best word. But we are thinking of doing two sort of rooms or two Zooms. Not Zoom, but like YouTube. Basically places where we can do webinars. And the first room, we'll obviously have a schedule of all the events that are going down in the festival. But
Sure.
the first one would probably be all of the master classes, all of the Q&As, and all of that. While the second one would be performances only. And how I sort of want to schedule it would be to have the Q&A session or the master class after the person performs it in the performances section. And people can hop around or you already know there are going to be some people with both open.
Sure.
And
That's a wonderful idea.
yeah, we were thinking of doing maybe more rooms as well, but I think it might be ambitious considering that we do not have a lot of manpower right now to be hosting everything, and definitely not reliable internet in this area. So yeah, right now
Cool.
we're trying to set it up, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think I think COVID, the time we've spent online the last 3 years has been pretty interesting. And I think that question is really meant for someone who's your age. Um, Now I'm not even 40 yet. I don't consider myself old, but I will tell you that as young people, you have a much better idea as far as how to actually utilize the internet and technology, and you're already doing it. So I think how that happens uh, is more of a question for you and more of a question for people that have more experience in dealing with that. I teach the trombone, so um,
Yeah, I
that's
think that's honestly what I love about the trombone. It's just I teach the trombone, and the trombone is just such a humble instrument. It's just a tube, right? I
exactly.
mean, maybe the fancy trumpet players they get buttons, but yeah, I love that part about it. But with something so simple, there's also a lot of potential and a lot of mastery involved in it. Um,
That's exactly right.
Sorry. Yeah, I think sorry I got a little bit sidetracked there, but I
That's
just
okay.
wanted to I just wanted to talk about the trombone for a little. I think, I mean, it is low brass, so our nonprofit goes with all of low brass, including euphonium, tuba, and
Yeah.
all the others. But yeah, I think
Awesome.
that is all of the festival that we're actually going to go over. Are there any additional thoughts that you have?
I think we all need to remember that we're creating for the audience and that we're all motivated through performance. And we have to remember that when we're studying. And if you can dream big, which all of you at LBN are, then you can really achieve something incredible. And I wish you all the best. And I'm really excited to see where this goes. So, congratulations on the work you've done. And I'm pretty optimistic for LBN and everything all of you do.
Yeah, just really quickly, will you be participating in the festival as a judge or an artist?
I believe we have talked about me being a judge. Um, and other than that, we can talk about some things if I can find some time, or if we can find some time to do stuff since we're so close here in California. Um, but I'm willing to help out, and I'll definitely be helping out judging.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that was it for our podcast, episode 5.
Great.
And yeah, thank you all for listening and definitely give your input because we definitely need the audience's input. Like Dr. Zokaites so emphasized, and I want to emphasize that as well. I think we have been talking, there was there were some skeptics out there actually thinking that we were sort of scammy because we are such a new nonprofit, right? Um, and we basically interacted with the audience and stuff like that, and they sort of really understand that we are for like not only the popular musicians, but basically any old trombone player in the world. And I think that's really empowering just working with people. Uh,
Well said, Yun. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that concludes today. All right.
Great.